lecturers, faculty members, and administrators from Unwahas. It's good to be here and to talk about my topic this afternoon. Actually, I have another topic tomorrow, but for this afternoon, let's focus on my first presentation entitled Advancing SDGs through Internationalization. I'm going to share with you as well the best practices for building global partnership. So I think we are now ready for my presentation, sir. So again, my topic is Advancing SDGs through Internationalization. So next slide, please, sir. Okay, so this is my topic. So this is all about sustainable development goals. So before starting on our goals, let us first take a look on what sustainable development is. So we actually have 17 goals or 17 areas pertaining to the SDG or the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, sir. Wherein it contains two key concepts. So there are two key concepts in terms of SDG or the Sustainable Development Goals. So the concept of the needs in particular is the essential needs of the world's poor to which overriding priority should be given. So we need to focus on what are the specific needs of the poor people. We need to address these needs. So you know naman the difference between the needs and wants. We just need to address, or we have to address, the needs of all those people. So the idea of limitation imposed of the state of technology and social organization on the environment's ability to meet present and future needs. So we also need to address the future needs of the people as well. We should not dwell or focus on the present only. Since it is sustainable, we have to dwell as well, or we need to take a look further on what the future would hold. So we need to think forward, or we need to have what we call the futures thinking. So instead of just addressing or thinking what are their needs for today, we should also address or think about the future of these children or the future of these people. Next slide, please. So the United Nations World Summit in 2005 describes the three components of the sustainable development, which are interdependent and mutually reinforcing pillars. So what are these three pillars or three components? The first one is economic development. We also have social development. And the last one is environmental protection. Okay, so again, we have three reinforcing pillars: economic, social development, and environmental protection. So these goals are like the pieces of puzzles known as the Sustainable Development Goals. If we put this pieces of puzzles together, then we can come up with the entire knowledge of the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, next slide, please. So if question is, do we really want to help build a sustainable world? Do you want to build a sustainable world? Of course, we want to build. So if you want to help build a sustainable world, what we need is to maintain or to know what are the sustainable development goals that we need to set. Okay, next slide, please, sir. So in September of 2015, the United Nations General Assembly formally adopted the Universal, Integrated, and Transformative 2030 Agenda of the Sustainable Development. So Sustainable Development is actually 17 Sustainable Development Goals, wherein the goals are to be implemented and achieved in every country including the Philippines, including Indonesia, from the year 2016 up to 2030. So we have about 14 to 15 years in order to have the sustainable development goals. So if you will be applying for international rankings, if Unwahas is aiming for international rankings, it is very important for you to address each and every sustainable development goals that is being set by the United Nations. That is very important. So anyway, basically, if you're going to look at your activities on a daily basis in Unwahas, most of them can be categorized in each of these 17 categories. So it's just a matter of putting into perspective categorizing these particular activities belong to this number of SDG. You just need to categorize it because basically I know there are so many activities by the Unwahas which could address each and every aspect or parcel of this SDG. Next slide, please. So the first goal or the first SDG is no to poverty. Of course, the aim is to end or to decrease to end the number of poor people in the world. Next slide, please. So here in the first SDG, the goal is directed towards the poor population. But who are the poor? Who are these poor people rather? So these are the 44% of the extreme poor people worldwide who are 14 years old and younger. 80% of the extreme poor worldwide live in rural areas. If you could look at them, they are living in remote rural areas. The third one is 39% of the extreme poor worldwide have no formal education. That's why you are very lucky that you are studying in Unwahas because 39% is actually accounts for the non-educated people who are considered poor because education, I guess, that is really your key to be more productive and prolific in life. And then last one is 65% of the extreme poor worldwide work in agriculture. But fortunately, the field of agriculture right now is gearing towards higher technology as compared to the previous technology in terms of agriculture. Next slide, please. Okay. So in 1990, nearly 36% of the world lived in extreme poverty according to the latest numbers. But globally, poverty has fallen to a new low of 10%. So we have been working on this goal. Every country, I guess, has been working on this goal to decrease poverty in their own locality or in their own location. Okay, next slide. So to end poverty, this is what we could do. The first one is no more extreme poverty, 50% less people living in poverty, more resources from various sources to make them available to end poverty, run system to find, measure, and track poverty. Of course, it has to be very important for us to determine first where are these poor people residing or where they are located. It's very important for you to have a research on that first because how are you going to know, how are you going to address the problem if you do not know where the problem is? So in order for us to do that, you need to plot where the poverty exists and then create a sound policy framework based on strategies that look after the poor and gender sensitive to facilitate investment in actions to end poverty. Next slide, please. So eradicating poverty in all its forms remain one of the greatest challenges facing humanity. While the number of people living in extreme poverty has dropped more than half. Too many people are still struggling to meet the most basic human needs, even if there is a rampant decrease on the number of extreme poor people, but still we need to work on that. Next slide, please. The second SDG is to zero hunger. So the main goal of the second SDG is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. So in the Philippines, the Commission on Higher Education Chair, Professor Popoy de Vera, one of his goals is to make agriculture sexy. So that is one of his goals, is for the agriculture to be more attractive to young people. Because if the mindset of you young people is that agriculture is just for poor people, agriculture is not that productive, agriculture is not that high-tech, you should set that aside and create more solutions or create more facilities in order to improve the resources of our country, particularly in terms of agriculture. So that is actually one of the goals of the Commission of Education in the Philippines, is to have a food security and sustainable agriculture as well. Okay, next, please. So after a prolonged decline, world hunger appears to be on the rise again. So conflict, the drought, disasters, they would bring poverty, which is the main cause of hunger. So we have nearly 1 in 8 people experience chronic hunger. Imagine, one out of 8 people. So that's actually 870 million worldwide who would experience hunger. And of 1.4 billion living in poverty, 10 billion live in rural areas where farming is the main source of subsistence diet. Imagine how ironic that is. The people who are actually doing agriculture or planting or whatever, they are the ones who are experiencing poverty and hunger, while in fact they have the most access to food. So instead of consuming the food, they tend to sell it in order to get money. That is very ironic for us. Next slide, please. So these are the different facts and figures. So 815 million people are food insecure. 25% of the world's children are stunted, meaning they are not able to grow or they are poorly nourished. 66 million children go to school hungry every day. Imagine, how are you going to absorb all your studies or all your lessons if you are hungry? And 1/6 children in developing countries is underweight. So that is actually the facts and figures when it comes to hunger. Next slide, please. So here in the target, so in the next slide, the target says that by 2030, there will be, this is our goal in 2030. We need to have food for everyone all year long. We should stop malnutrition, more investment in international cooperation, double agricultural productivity, correct and prevent trade restriction and distortion, limit extreme food price volatility. So this is the main goal by 2030. So next slide. So these are the efforts to combat hunger and malnutrition. We have, previous slide, thank you. So these are the efforts to combat hunger and malnutrition. We should have advanced, that has to advance significantly by 2000. So we should ending hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition for all. So that is the greatest goal of UN in 2030. So next slide. For the third one, we have good health and well-being. So aside from being removing the poverty, so food security, of course, the third most important is good health and well-being. So to ensure health lives and promote well-being for all ages. Next slide, please, sir. So this will be our aim: ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages, from womb up to tomb, before the tomb. So we need to be healthy all day long. Next, please. So let us first define what is health. The World Health Organization's definition, which is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It's not just physical. Of course, mental and social well-being is also important. So this is actually a multi-dimensional concept where people may define it differently according to gender, life stage, and culture. So it varies. So actually that is relative. Health is very relative depending on who would define health itself. Next slide, please. So the right to health means access to universal health coverage. Okay, so that has to be timely, affordable, good quality, acceptable, appropriate. So how is the health coverage here in Indonesia? Is it good? Do you have access to hospitals, public hospitals, access to health clinics and everything? So it's a good thing that you have good access to your health facilities and health services in Indonesia. Okay, so if we're going to look, next slide please, we're going to look at the statistics, every minute, if you would believe, 219 children get life-saving vaccines, but 11 under the age of 5 still die mostly from preventable causes. So that is a very sad reality. Next slide please. And another thing is that maternal deaths decreased by about 44% between 1990 to 2015. That is actually a good sign that we are improving in terms of our health services. So this is actually according to World Health Organization. Next slide, please. So life expectancy at birth has increased from 63 to 65 years old since 2000 in less developed country. That is also a good start as well. So next slide, please. So here is the overall goal: to ensure healthy lives and promote for all at all ages by 2023. This is actually our goal. Global maternity mortal ratio down to less than 70 per 100,000, reduced deaths from hazardous pollution and contamination. We also have universal health care coverage. So these are just some of the visions of the United Nations in terms of providing healthcare services to people worldwide. Next, please. So by creating a healthier environment, avoid and reduce pollution and adopting cleaner energy is very important as well. And use can be surely reach our goal by 2030 if we're going to prevent that. The fourth one, which is actually, next slide please, sir. The fourth one is actually the main goal or main objective of every academic institution, just like Unwahas and Cavite State University. Of course, we have quality education. Next slide, please. So the goal of UN in terms of SDG for quality education is to ensure inclusive and quality education for children like you and promote lifelong learning. So here, lifelong learning is very important. So it's not just after that you've graduated, you will stop learning. So as we all know, most of the lecturers here or most of the instructors are doing their lifelong learning. Even after their PhD degree, they still enroll into different skill-enhancing activities, which is important because in time, there are always innovations, there are always added knowledge that could be shared to you students. Because if we will stop from PhD, then no knowledge will be gained at all. It has to be a continuous improvement, continuous professional improvement and personal improvement in each and every one of us. It is our responsibility, especially for all these lecturers, to upgrade themselves professionally. So next, please. Okay, so here are the facts and figures. Enrollment in primary education in developing countries have reached 91%, but 57 children still remain out of school. That's ironic. So in East Asia and the Pacific region where we belong, at least 35 million of children do not have access to quality education. Next, please. So an estimated 50% of out-of-school youth children of primary school age live in conflicted affected areas. So they are very unfortunate. And 103 million youth worldwide lack basic literacy skills, and have more than 60% of them are women. Still, gender inequality is rampant nowadays. So next, please. So among all these targets, the more important target is at least let all boys and girls equally have their primary education. Because in some backward countries, they give priority to boys rather than girls. They send more of their sons rather than their daughters. Daughters should help at home, and the boys should be the one who has to be educated. So I guess there is an equal amount. I guess there are more than females here than men, if my calculation is correct. So it has to be an equal opportunity in terms of education for both girls and boys. So we should not have gender discrimination in terms of education. But as I have observed earlier, in the engineering department, mechanical engineering, there are so many boys and one girl only. And when it comes to chemical engineering, it's vice versa. There are more girls than boys in chemical engineering. So I guess we still have some sort of stereotype when it comes to programs that are being offered. Actually, it's also the same in CAVITE State University. And we are actually looking for strategies on how to break the stereotype in terms of choosing their careers. Just like if you are a nurse, majority of nursing students are female rather than male. So we really want to break the stereotype in terms of gender issues in respect to their program that is being or profession that they want to have. Next slide, please, sir. So if you're going to work on this goal by 2030, this is what will happen. So by 2030, Sub-Saharan African is projected to achieve the largest increase in the proportion of children completing secondary school. However, more than 3 out of 10 will still miss out. But still, it's a good start. And then compared with only 1 out of 10 in the rest of the world. Next slide, please, sir. So the goal number 5, this is the gender equality. Okay, so it should be the gender equality. Next slide, sir, please. So gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but this is actually a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. So the goal says that achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. So why is it that if you're going to look at this goal, empower all women and girls? So that is actually a bias itself. But what the UN wants to express here is that since boys and men are given more opportunities before, they need to balance or they need to increase the opportunities given to women and girls as compared to boys and men. So they should have equal opportunities. Next slide, please. So the target, or to achieve this, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. These are some of the examples that they want to achieve. Ensure the use of enabling technology to promote the empowerment of women, ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making. So women now are given the opportunity to lead and to become administrators as well. Not just before, wherein men or higher ranking are given to men only. But right now, women are given as well the equal opportunity to lead. So as I have seen earlier, you also have vice rector who is a female. You have deans who are female as well. So it's equality. Next slide, please. So these are some of the gender inequalities that we face right now. So we have intimate partner violence. 1 in 5 women and girls aged 14 to 49 reported experience physical and or sexual violence by an intimate partner. Imagine, intimate partner within 12-month period. 49 countries have no laws specifically protecting women from domestic violence, and 37 countries exempt rape perpetrators from prosecution if they are married or subsequently married the victim. So, but nowadays, they are actually implementing, or they are convincing countries that even if married couples, the women can actually charge her husband with rape. Okay, next slide, please. So harmful practices such as female genital mutilation or child marriages continue, but there has been decline in these practices in the past years. As we all know, education really plays a greater part in this, because we need to educate these people about their rights and about what to do and what not to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so another inequality is that women and girls do more unpaid work than men, even though they put in more time. So that is sad reality for females as well. Next. So implementing new legal frameworks regarding female equality and the eradication of harmful practices targeted at women. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, so when some forms of discrimination against women and girls are diminishing, gender inequality continues to hold women back and deprives them of basic rights and opportunities. So with that, we need to empower women. That requires addressing structural issues such as unfair social norms and attitudes, as well as developing progressive legal frameworks that promote equality between women and men. Next slide, please, sir. So the next slide, sir. So the next one is clean water and sanitation. Of course, we all need to have access to clean water and sanitation as well. Next slide, sir. The goal for the 6th SDG is to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So we need to manage water. We need to manage it wisely. Next slide, please. Okay, so let us look at some statistics about availability of proper sanitation and clean water. So there are around 2.1 billion people globally lack safe water at home, and 263 million spend more than 30 minutes per round trip collecting water. Imagine, we are so fortunate that we have faucets and water available right away. 844 million do not have basic drinking water, and 159 million drink water directly from surface such as streams or lake. Next slide, please. Unavailability of water, of drinking sanitation is a major problem, but is easily preventable if big steps are taken. So what are these big steps? More people own a mobile phone than have access to a toilet. Imagine how depressing that is. All of us have access to cell phones, but not all of us have access to clean water or to a toilet in particular. Every day, girls and women around the world spend 200 million hours collecting water instead of attending schools and pursuing economic independence. In the Philippines, we used to collect water from the river in a pail, and then you have to bring that to your home and then use that in washing toilet and everything. And then each day, an average of 5,000 people die due to water and sanitation diseases that are easily preventable. Next slide, please. So here, 14 deaths are due to diarrheal diseases from drinking unclear water. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, so these are the goals: availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So universal and equitable access to drinking water for all, expand international cooperation and capacity building, support the leveling countries in water activities, implement integrated water source management. So those are some of the activities on how we could address goal number 6. Okay, next slide, please, sir. Okay, next slide, sir. So this is progress. This is actually our progress until now. For I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. 1.9 billion people have gained access to piped drinking water since 1990. These are our improvement. Access to proper sanitation. In 1990, we have 54%, and in 2015, 68%. But that's actually a very low number, considering that it's more than several years. 2 million people accessed hygiene education through Australian aid. Every 22nd, a child dies as a result of poor sanitation. 2.4 billion people still lack access to toilet, and 1 in 10 still lack clean water to drink today. So those are some of the statistics. Next, please. So the number 7 is affordable and clean energy. So for the goal number 7, we need to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Next slide, please. Some of the targets set are this: universal access to affordable, modern energy services, enhance international cooperation to facilitate access to clean energy, research, and technology, substantial increase in the share of renewable energy in the energy mix. Next slide, please, sir. So let's view some energy-related problems and their solutions. So 1 in 5 people still lack access to modern electricity, and 3 billion rely on wood. Do you still practice this? No. At home, people rely on wood, charcoal, or animal waste for cooking and eating. So this is the solution: ensure that everyone has access to clean, affordable, as well as reliable modern energy. Next, please. Okay. Every year, indoor air pollution kills 4.3 million people, most of them women and children, because they are forced to stay at home. And the solution is to invest in renewable energy and disseminate its use. Okay. Then we have, next, please. Energy provided by fossil fuels in main contribution by climate change, representing 60% of all greenhouse gas. Put in place energy saving policies. That's one of the solution. Okay. Next slide, please, sir. The 8th SDG is good jobs and economic growth. Of course, the reason why we are studying hard is for us to create or have good jobs and for our families to have economic growth. So that's the ultimate goal, I guess. Next slide, please, sir. So the goal 8 is to promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. Okay, so given the figures, next slide, sir, please. Given the figures, annual global GDP is between 2005 to 2009, nag-increase. Around 1 in 10 children worldwide were engaged in child labor in 2012. Youth were 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults in 2017. Earning inequalities are still pervasive. Men earned 12.5% more than women in 40 of 45 countries within the data. So imagine, still men earn more than women. Next slide, please. These are all the targets of this goal we need to achieve globally. Here are them. We have for the good jobs and economic growth. Next slide, please, sir. And then targets such as this: promote sustainable, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth for full productive employment and decent work for all. So eradicate forced labor, modern slavery, and human trafficking, improve global resources efficiently in consumption, production, to economic growth from environmental degradation. So those are some of the goals that we need to set. Next slide, please. To eradicate problems related to sustainable economic growth, firstly, of course, is to eradicate poverty through employment and decent work. Then create green jobs to help people enter labor force while protecting the natural resources. So there has to be a balance between entering the workforce and, of course, protecting the natural resources. There has to be a balance between these two components. Okay, then the 9th goal, we have industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So the goal, next slide, sir. So the goal for the 9th SDG is to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. Next slide, sir. So we have observed that 40% of the world's energy is consumed by buildings. And 40% of energy saving can be realized through intelligent building automation, and 21% of greenhouse gas emission comes from building. Next slide, sir. So 80% of households in developed countries have internet access, compared with just 7% of households in the least developed countries. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, so these are the targets needed to be achieved. Okay, so these are all the targets that the UN wants us to achieve. Next slide, sir, please. So we need to build resilient infrastructure and promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization and foster innovation through enhanced scientific research and technology, particularly in developing countries. By 2030, we should encourage innovation, update infrastructures, and retrofit industries to make them more sustainable. So these are some of the examples wherein we can address goal number 9. Next slide, sir, please. Okay, so to reach this, we need to do all this. So many countries lack basic resilient infrastructure. So the solution is invest in infrastructure. Poor infrastructure in a major barrier for thriving businesses. Innovate to green infrastructure. Infrastructure and industrialization often cause environmental degradation. Solution is to build resilient infrastructure. Next slide, please, sir. Here it is shown by how creating green buildings can help reach goals 3, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, and 15. If we would build greener building, we can address this. The first one is good health and well-being because it is less polluted, affordable and clean energy, decent work, industry innovation, sustainable community, responsible consumption, climate action, and life on land. So it can be addressed by just having the SDG number 9. Okay, next, please. For the 10th, okay, we're more than half through of the SDGs. For the 10th SDG, reduced inequalities. So the goal actually is related to reducing inequalities. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, so inequalities in income, again, inequalities against poor children, inequalities in people with disabilities, and women living in rural areas are disturbing. So too much of the world's wealth is held at a very small group of people, sad to say. Okay? Rich people are getting richer and richer each day, and poor people are getting poorer and poorer each day. Next slide, please, sir. Okay. So social inequalities, too much of the world's wealth is held by a very small group of people. When every individual is self-sufficient, the entire world, of course, will prosper. Okay. Next slide, please, sir. So since there is a rising inequality in a global phenomenon, okay, so in the last 3 decades, 7 out of 10 people living in a country have been facing inequalities. At times, even in schools, there are several inequalities. Also, the report mentioned that the next 25 years, the world will have its first trillionaire because of the rampant increase in the amount of money that they have or resources that they have. Next, please, sir. So income inequality is a global problem that requires global solutions. So for example, if we have to make sure that people living in poverty get support and access to economic growth as that given to those who have ample or large amount of money. Laws and practices do not discriminate against anybody. Disadvantaged and vulnerable people must be protected as well, and people who live one country to live in and another benefit from laws to protect them. Next slide, please, sir. For the goal number 11, this is about building sustainable cities as well as communities. Okay, so the goal is to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. What makes a city sustainable? Okay, so let's take a look at this. Sustainable communities are hallmarked by common practices and priorities, which include waste reduction, water conservation, local food production, renewable energy, public transportation, green LEED building design, EV charging station, city policies that encourage sustainability. Next. In the European Union today, quality of life in cities has reduced due to poor dwelling conditions. So disturbance by noise, overcrowding, and more occurrence of crimes. Sustainable transportation facilities are also degrading slowly. That is very fortunate. Next slide, please, sir. So the targets set for this goal, these are the target goals. By 2030, ensure access to all adequate, safe, and affordable housing. By 2030, increase the number of cities adopting to different frameworks for disaster risk reduction. So those are some of the goals that we need to have. Here are some of the challenges to achieving this goal and how can we be able to solve them. The first one is the rapid and often unexplained urbanization. witnessed worldwide has led to increased pressure on the environment. As I have mentioned earlier, there has to always be balance between the infrastructure development as well as the protection of the environment. Other cities account up to 80% of energy consumption, and then our solution is investment in renewable energy. Cities are particularly vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. The solution is to protect cities which are important social, cultural, and economic centers. Next slide, please, sir. So today, if you've happened to be in Singapore, I'm in Singapore a couple of days back, this is the best example of sustainable city, if you've been there. So here, they have Transparency International ranked Singapore by 6th out of 180 least corrupt countries. Singapore ranks 2nd among global cities for green buildings. They are the 20th annual quality of living rankings, ranked Singapore as the most livable city in Asia. Singapore is also the leading smart city in the world according to the Global Smart City Index, and the city-state is the most sustainable Asian city according to the Sustainable Cities Index as well. So hopefully soon we will just be as sustainable as Singapore is. The next SDG is responsible consumption. So as we all know, those who will be attending the ecology class, overconsumption is one of the greatest problems in the world. Overconsumption. So we need to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. So that is the goal for SDG 12. So next, sir. At the current time, material consumption of natural resources is increasing, particularly in Eastern Asia, where waste 1.3 billion tons of food per year. So that account can be used to end poverty and hunger actually. So food waste is very rampant in Eastern Asia. Next slide, please, sir. Here are the set targets for this goal. So these are just some of the targets. Promote sustainable public procurement practices, achieve environmental sound, manage chemicals and all waste throughout their life cycle. So next, sir. So these are some of the problems and the solutions. So every year, about 1/3 of all food produced, equivalent to 1.3 billion tons, is wasted. So we need to reduce the food wasted by producers, retailers, and consumers. Fast food actually is one of the greatest places wherein there is food wastage, because they need to prepare the specific amount of food, and then in this particular time, example in a burger chain, they need to prepare the burger and they need to consume or sell it for 10 minutes, example. And if within 10 minutes, if not all the burgers were sold, the remaining burgers were being thrown out. So for them, that is a quality service, since they want to provide you with the freshest food, but actually that is also an example of excessive food wastage. Next, please, sir. Okay, household consume 29% of global energy. The solution is to switch to energy efficient lighting. Next. Okay, freshwater supplies such as rivers and lakes are polluted. The solution, reduce the release of chemicals and waste into the air as well as to the water. Okay, next please. We can do our part by using energy-saving devices, okay, such as this one, energy monitoring devices, energy-saving standby plugs, and solar chargers. So those are some of the examples on how we can consume or we can reserve energy resources. Next, please. The 13th SDG is climate action or climate change. Okay, So what is the goal? So to take the urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. So climate change daw, that is inevitable. Okay? So these are the facts and figures. Next slide, sir, please. These are the facts and figures. So from 1880 to 2012, average global temperature increased by 0.85 degrees Celsius. Imagine how hot it is right now as compared before. Given the current temperature, an ongoing emission of greenhouse gases, it is unlikely that by the end of this century, the increase in global temperature would increase 15 degrees Celsius. And oceans have warmed, the amount of snow and ice have diminished, and the sea level has risen. So, according to studies, before, Singapore, Indonesia, and Philippines are all interconnected. We are in a one island only. But due to global warming and due to the increasing levels of water in the ocean, we were subdivided into different islands. Okay. Next, please, sir. So 60% of the world's ecosystem are degraded or unsustainably used. 10% of the tropical forests have been cleared in the past 25 years. Next slide, please, ma'am. So for the climate action, here are some of the things that we can do. Promote mechanisms for a rising capacity for effective climate change related to planning, management in developed countries, and strengthen the resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters in all countries. Next slide, please, sir. So if we hit the climate action global goal, we will stop land turning into desert and protecting the homes, crops, and livelihood of 700 million people. Next slide, please, sir. For the SDG number 14, life below water. So this is, the goal is to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development goals. Okay. So why do you think, next slide, please, sir. So why ocean matter for our health? So more than 3 billion people rely on fish for food and protein as well. Okay, next slide, sir. So life underwater drives the global system that make our planet habitable above water. So therefore, we need to protect our ocean. Next slide, please, sir. So due to the marine pollution, such as due to dumping of plastics in ocean, this could probably happen, or this is what is happening right now. 2.6 billion people rely on seafood as their marine source of protein. Over 30% of marine habitats have now been destroyed, and at this rate, by 2100, more than half of the world's marine species may stand on the brink of extinction. Next slide, please, sir. So the target of this goal requires us to protect aquatic ecosystem from pollution, overfishing, acidification, and others. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, here are other targets for SDG 14. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, so here are some of the solutions to the challenge we face. Okay, so here are just solution: protect marine and coastal system, end harmful fishing and subsidies, fight climate change by reducing sedimentation, stop coral mining, and protect sustainable tourism. Okay, next slide, please. So we need to join the global effort to save our ocean. Okay. The next SDG, if we have life underwater, we also have life on land. So that is the 15th. What is the goal? So the sustainability manage forests, combat deforestation, halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. Okay, so here are some of the statistics also. 2.6 billion people depend directly on agriculture, but 52% of the land used for agriculture is moderately or severely affected by soil degradation. 13 million hectares of forest are being lost every year. So those are just some of the statistics. So these are, next slide please. So these are the main targets in terms of our 15th Sustainable Development Goals: reduce degradation, ensure conservation of mountain ecosystem, achieve land degradation neutrality, and others. Okay, next slide please. So by 2030, our forest will be saved from deforestation. That is the ultimate goal. Second to the last SDG is peace, justice, and strong institutions. So the goal is to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. So that is our goal. So next slide, please. So this is the state of the global peace with a crisis in different areas in the world. The international standoff going, it sometimes feel like the world is at World War again. Next slide, please. Worse still is that the world as a whole has been getting incrementally less and less peaceful every year since 2007. So sharply attacking the trend that has been seen a global move away from the conflict since the end of the Second World War. Next slide, please. So these are the set targets for SDG 16, provide legal identity for all, ensure public access to information, strengthen relevant national institutions, ensure equal access to justice, reduce illicit financial and armed loss. Next slide, please, sir. So these are just some of the solutions that we can have of environmental crimes, develop effective, accountable, transparent institutions, and provide alternate livelihoods to people. Next slide, please. These are the objectives that can help gain peace, which include sound business environment, high environment of human capital, acceptance of rights of others. Next slide, please, sir. So this is the last SDG, partnership for the goals. Okay, so this is the advocacy, of course, of the International and Linkage Office of CAVITE State University is to establish partnership, because right now, the world where we live in, we do not encourage competition at all. This is actually the time for collaboration and not competition. Usually, we see other academic institutions as competitor or as our competitive. But right now, due to the sense of collaboration, we now see them as partners, because our ultimate goal is to increase or to promote quality education to all our stakeholders. So we, of course, we cannot do that alone. We also need other educational institutions to help us, such as Unwahas. Okay? So the goal is to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. We cannot do this alone. We cannot do all these SDGs alone, but instead, we need the help of other institutions. Next slide, please, sir. So these are the targets to work upon: mobilize resources, implement development assistance commitment, mobilize financial resources for developing countries, invest in least developed countries, knowledge sharing and cooperation for access to science, technology, and promotion, promote sustainable technology to developing countries, assist developing countries in attaining debt sustainability. Okay, next slide, please, sir. Okay, we also have enhanced SDG capacity in developing countries, enhance global macroeconomic stability, remove trade barriers for least developed countries, enhance policy coherence for sustainable development. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, we also have enhanced availability of reliable data, further develop measurements of progress, and others. Next slide, please, sir. So this is the ultimate goal. In 2030, Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes that sense of voluntarism is very important as well, which are essential stakeholders to achieving and supporting all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Volunteering effectively facilitates the development of the all Sustainable Development Goals by raising awareness, inspiring, or engaging in grassroots efforts. Next slide, please, sir. So in Cavite State University, we believe that SDG agenda for development isn't just an international agenda. It is also a part of Cavite State University's agenda, since this SDGs reflects our ambition and desire to give our stakeholders to a better quality of life. Therefore, we must take ownership. We must claim the SDGs with complete devotion as well as passion. So we in Cavite State University always see to it that in every activity that we do, we need to align this in this 17 SDGs. So this is the first part of my talk. So before we proceed to the question and answer, can I just share, I just want to share with you the internationalization efforts of Cavite State University. Sir? So this is actually part of the partnership or part of SDG 17. So sir? The second presentation, sir.
Excuse me, Mas Guri. The second part of the slide. Bagian yang kedua, silakan.
I'll stand up. So this is the internationalization strategy of Cavite State University. Again, I am Maria Veronica Peña Florida, the Director for International and Local Collaboration and Linkages Office of Cavite State University. Next slide, please, sir. So these are the contents of my presentation. Definition of internationalization, internationalization versus globalization. What's the difference? Significance of internationalization. What are the benefits? What are the types of internationalization? Of course, we need to discuss as well the risk and challenges, constraints and barriers, indicators and recommendation. Next slide, please, sir. So worldwide, internationalization is becoming a new trend in higher education. So before, way back in around 2017, there is actually no internationalization office in Cavite State University. And sometime in 2017, the Commission on Higher Education directed all the universities and colleges to have their own internationalization office, since the mandate of the SUCs is to have an agreement with international partners. So this is really becoming a trend right now since 2017, which is internationalization. So this is the context representing an issue of concern of higher educational institutions, actually within the last 2 decades. Next, please, sir. So the international process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, function, and delivery of post-secondary education in order to enhance the quality of education, as well as research for all students, staff, and to make a meaningful contribution to the society. Of course, if we are just confined within the four corners of our country, how would we know what is the other country doing? How would we know that we are at par or we are at the same level as that of the same engineers, example, in other countries, the same doctors or the same medical practitioners? Are they having the same equal amount of knowledge and skills? Hence, it is very important for us to have an internationalization in our institution. Next, please, sir. So, when we say globalization, this is the flow of technology, economy, knowledge, people, goods, service, and capital across borders. So internationalization of higher education is considered a result of response to globalization. Next, sir. So this is the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0, that requires much more interdisciplinary education and innovation. So when we say interdisciplinary, engineers should not only focus on numbers. They have to integrate other aspects or other disciplines into their practice as well. Next, sir. So the significance is that to increase the institution's capacity to build new knowledge and raise professionalism and global citizenship. So when we say global citizen, they should know about the world, understand and appreciate diversity. They understand and appreciate as well as respect diversity. Realize how economic, political, social, cultural, and technological and environmental differences work. So we need to have some sort of holistic approach in everything that we do. Next, sir. So what are the benefits of internationalization? Includes or increases students' international and global awareness, improve quality of teaching and learning. So teaching for those lecturers, of course, if you are engaged in faculty exchanges, of course, your teaching strategies, the lessons that you will be delivering to your class will be improved as well. And the learning process of your students can be enhanced as well. Enhance international cooperation, networking, and capacity building. Strengthen institutional research and knowledge production. Enhance prestige and profile for the institution. The more renowned you are internationally, of course, this is more prestigious. More students will be enrolling into your schools, and more partners will be interested in partnering with you. Increased opportunity to compare institutional performance with the international good practice. As what I have mentioned earlier, we need to be globally recognized in order to know if we are really that good. Because if we will just be confined in our area, we wouldn't know if we are really that good. Maybe in Indonesia you are good, but of course you also need to check. It is some sort of reality check if you could be at the same level as that of your colleagues abroad. Next, please. Okay, so these are the different types of internationalization. We have the cross-border internationalization or the study abroad, and then we have internationalization at home or I8H. So CAVITE State University and Unwahas have several activities, both cross-border and internationalization at home. So last year, some of your lecturers visited Cavite State University and they conducted series of lectures for 1 week. So that is an example of cross-border internationalization, because cross-border internationalization is not just for students. Also, cross-border internationalization can also be for the lecturers. So they went to us, and then this time it has to be reciprocal. We, on the other hand, come over to Unwahas to deliver some of our lectures as well. And then for the internationalization at home, this is an example in I come over, I discuss something with you, you wouldn't our university. And another example of internationalization at home is the conduct of webinars. So, Unwahas would have an international webinar or webinar series, invite lecturers from Cavite State University to have their expertise shared with you. So that is an example of internationalization. Next slide, please, sir. So this is the sample of the cross-border internationalization, student mobility, teaching staff mobility, and research, development, and extension collaboration. Okay? So earlier this morning, your head of the research is here, and then he's asking me if there is a possibility for us to conduct your research collaboration. And actually, there is now an approved funded research by the College of Engineering and Information Technology, as well as the Faculty of Engineering here in Unwahas. They are just waiting for the release of their budget, and then hopefully by the end of this year, they can start already with the research collaboration. And this coming last week of September and early October, some of your faculty or lecturers will be coming over. Now this time as well with the community extension. So that is also one form of collaboration. Border internationalization. Next, please, sir. So internationalization at home. So the purposeful integration of international and intercultural dimensions in the formal and informal curriculum of all students within domestic learning environments. Next, please. So these are the samples of internationalization at home, internationalization at curriculum, teaching and learning methods, virtual mobility, e-learning, branch campus, academic partnerships such as joint twinning program. So earlier this morning, we were also discussing with your internationalization officer regarding the joint or twinning program. So we can also practice that together with Unwahas. Next slide, please, sir. So this is a comprehensive internationalization effort, articulated institutional commitment. Of course, this cannot be possible if it lacks the administrative leadership, structure, and staffing, curriculum, co-curriculum, and learning outcomes, faculty policies and practices, student mobility, and lastly, collaboration. Next slide, please, sir. So what are the factors affecting internationalization? The first one, of course, is very obvious: foreign language study or the language barrier. So earlier, I'm also talking to your internationalization officer, and we're discussing, is it possible for us to conduct series of seminars wherein our institution will be delivering the English language proficiency. And then on the other hand, if we are planning to have exchange student program, maybe some of your faculty or lecturers can deliver or can train our students in Bahasa. So that's one of the projects that we want to work on. The second is the information communication technology. We also have international organizations, transportation, particularly in our institution. Transportation is quite, I mean, if we will be traveling to Indonesia. It's quite expensive. So that's also one of the factors affecting internationalization, global trade in education service, schooling strategies, as well as context. Next, please, sir. So the context is global, regional, national, and local. Of course, you need to also develop your local strategies before you go out and grow globally. Next slide, please, sir. So indicators for the internationalization, the two main indicators are often used. One for research, international publications, and citation. I know all of the lecturers can relate here in the international publications and citation. So the other is for education, proportion of international students and staff, and partnership cooperation, which is the most important use for indicators in ranking. For the Times Higher education, we were actually ranked here in the Times Higher, US Stars, and World University rankings for innovation. I know this is the ultimate goal for academic institutions, is to be ranked globally. The SDGs that I've discussed earlier would play an important part and important roles in having the university or the world rankings. You need to adjust, especially for Times Higher education, which is really focused on the SDGs. You need to address the SDGs. Next slide, please, sir. So reflecting, rethinking, and refocusing on higher education internationalization. It connects cultures, the global and local context. Context analysis is essential for both strategy development, assessment of strategies. It is not a goal itself, but a means to enhance quality of institution, its program, student, and staff. So we have greater international student diversity, which is more important than increased international student recruitment. Next slide, please, sir. Okay, internationalization model has been shifted from cooperation to competition. Model must become more inclusive and less elitist. The first one is that it has to be internationalization models has been shifted from competition to cooperation rather. So no universal model which is good for all institutions. There should be integration of institutional, national, and supranational policies, more alignment of the higher education internationalization with other educational agencies. Next slide, sir, please. So internationalization is meaningful only if it brings an added value. Of course, that is the ultimate goal, is we need to add more value to our institution. And successful institution may fail due to the following: focusing on single aspect only. When we say single aspect, they only focus on students, but they don't develop their faculty members. Or they just focus on faculty members and they don't focus on the infrastructure development. There has to be a synergy of all this. Buying ready-made models, obsessing with rankings, which is not good as well, addressing all the tools at once. You have to take one step at a time in internationalization. Next, please, sir. Okay, risk. These are some of the risks and challenges of internationalization: increased commercialization and competition. Rising numbers, challenge of quantity versus quality. Because nowadays, international organization would want to have more and more international students. Well, in fact, they cannot accommodate them at once. Lack of supportive educational policy, limitation of digital education delivery, mismatch between academic quality and recognition, brain drain phenomenon, and insufficient data regarding internationalization. Next, sir. For the barriers to internationalization, lack of adequate financial and funding sources, which is very crucial if you really want to have a successful internationalization. Of course, there has to be sources of fund. And then lack of explicit and consistent internationalization strategies, limited experience of faculty staff, visa restriction is also one of the barriers. Difficulties in recognition of qualifications, domination of modern models, of Western models rather, but actually we have a very good models in Asia. Insufficient foreign language learning provisions. Okay, next slide please. So SDG 4, kanina, this is quality education, ensures inclusive, equitable quality education and promotes lifelong learning opportunities for all. Of course, education and training pillar is one of the 4 target aspects under the social dimension. Next, please, sir. Okay, so here are some of the recommendations if you want to have a good internationalization program. Enhancement of the international exchanges among students and staff, strengthening language skills and cross-border communication, implementation of higher education system reform from a global perspective, curriculum internationalization and use of international teaching materials and ICT as e-learning, increase the partnership and networks, agreements, and worldwide cooperation in education and research, and lastly, overcoming financial, administrative, and funding constraints. So those are some of the recommendations if you want to have a very good internationalization program, sir. Okay, so that concludes my presentation. With that, I will be giving a quote from an African proverb. Yes, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to get far, we should get together. Okay, thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Thank you. For evaluation, kindly scan the code here. Thank you so much. Sir, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause for Professor Fernie for the presentation. Okay, there goes. I think we have learned a lot. I myself get a lot of insight, especially in terms of internationalization. Indeed, we need to learn, and especially students, learn language and be ready for exchanges. So I think it's time for us for question and answers. For those of you, I believe that there are things that you would like to dig deeper from Professor Fernie. So for those of you who are ready with your question, please raise your hands. Oh, we have a question from Zoom. Can we have it displayed here? Okay, there goes. Question. Okay, the first one is from Mas Anwar. Sorry. What? It keeps moving. Okay, I'll wait for it. The first question is from. I think we'll take these 2 questions first before we go to the offline. The first one is, what is the criteria for a job to be categorized as a green job? And the second one, in terms of sustainable tourism, how can we contribute in the achievement of sustainable tourism?
Okay, so when we say green job, these are jobs that would be productive enough, but should not hamper for the ecological growth of our environment. As I have mentioned earlier, there has to be a balance between an economic growth as well as the ecological growth as well. It has to be hand in hand. So when you are selecting a job, it has, when we say green jobs, these are jobs that should not increase pollution, that should not increase overconsumption, that should not increase overpopulation, but instead it promotes impact on a great impact or positive impact on our environment as well. I'm not just saying that when we say green job, you have to do the agriculture thing or you have to be in biology field in order to be in green jobs. But if you are an engineer, and then you try to lessen the amount of pollution in the area, that is actually considered as a green job. So if you are in an office, example, if you are working in a 9-to-5 office job, and then instead of photocopying or instead of using carbonated paper, so you can just skip or you can go paperless. That is also considered as green job. So you need to take your initiative or you need to have your own initiative in making your job green job as we see it. Okay, so that is the first question. And then the second question, sorry, I forgot the second question. Okay.
The second one. In terms of sustainable tourism, how can we contribute in the achievement of sustainable tourism?
Okay. So when we say sustainable tourism, it is a type of tourism wherein you don't tend to exploit the environment. Tourism nowadays is some kind of commercialized, especially case for example in the Philippines, in Boracay. That is very commercialized already. The tourism there is very commercialized. And instead of preserving the waters as well as the ecology in that area, due to commercialism, there is a deterioration of the quality of life below waters. So we need to have the sustainable tourism. So how can we practice that? In Cavite State University, we have what we call the Agri-Ecotourism Park. So that is actually an example of sustainable tourism, wherein the animals are there. You just can feed them with the grasses that can be found everywhere. And then we've maintained the balance, the ecological balance in the area. There are flora and fauna that are found in the university. There are no plants as well as animals that are from the outside that is being brought in the inside. There has to be the natural habitats of the university. That is what sustainable tourism is all about.
Okay, I think we can proceed to the next question from Dwi Putri. How can we encourage more cross-sector and cross-country collaboration to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs?
So cross-sector or cross-country collaboration, that is actually, when we say cross-sector and cross-cultural partnership, that is actually solving, or that is actually addressing one of the SDGs, particularly the partnership for the goals, which is 17. But in terms of cross-cultural exchange or cross-border exchange, it would really depend on the focus of your cross-country or cross-border exchange. Example, if it's in terms of academic, of course, the SDG that you are addressing is SDG number 4, which is quality education. If your cross-border collaboration focuses on research regarding how to conserve the life forms in the ocean, you are addressing actually the SDG regarding life below waters. If your focus, or if you have a program on community involvement or community extension services, and your focus is how to eradicate the pest in a coconut plantation, you are actually addressing life on land. So it depends, the cross-border function really depends on the focus of the collaboration. We cannot say that there is a specific, but usually if two academic institutions are exchanging, of course, they need to address the SDG in terms of quality education. So it depends on the focus of your exchange per se.
Very much for your answer. There actually are more questions here, but before we go any further, is there any questions from the room? Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Indah Riwayati for Chemical Engineering Department. I think this is very interesting topic. Yeah, actually, we know that this world is getting older and older, and the sustainability is a crucial factor in a development. That's why. And I want to know about the first thing about you presented that the poverty for about 65% poverty in the people who work in agriculture, right? And they love the better. And maybe I would like to know what is the meaning of poverty itself, and is there any criteria of poverty? I mean the standard criteria according maybe United Nations. What is the poverty itself? And then the second, maybe we know that for about 65% of poverty is the agriculture. They prefer to sell the food they produce than to consume itself, right? Maybe you can analyze or what is the reason so they do that. Maybe I think that's all my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Riway, for that question. The first indicator of the United Nations in terms of poverty is that they cannot afford the basic needs I don't have the exact number on what has to be the specific amount of income per year, but those people who cannot afford their basic necessities on a daily basis, they are considered poorest of the poor. Those who cannot send their children to school, those who cannot have access to quality food or basic necessity, as well as clean water, so they are considered as the poorest of the poor. That's why they are considered as number one is to eradicate poverty. If you wanted to be ranked in the Times Higher Education, that is the first thing that you need to address poverty. They need to know how many percentage of people of the population in your students belong to the very low poverty line. That you will be having a good score if you have certain number of students who belong to a very low poverty line. So, and then if you also offer scholarships to those people who belong to the marginalized sector of the society. So the second question is on the for those people who are working in agriculture, they are the ones who are hungry all the time, right? So the reason for that is since they are the ones who are producing, sabi nga sa Pilipinas, kung hindi ka marunong magtanim, wala kang karapatang kumain. In English, if you don't know how to plant, you do not have, if you do not know how to plant, you don't have the right to eat. So that's one of the saying in the Philippines. But actually, the truth is, most of the farmers don't have. They have very poor nutrition because instead of consuming, as I have mentioned, they actually sell these products. And for one, some of the reasons is that for one, they need to buy other stuff for the family. So since, example, rice. Before they were able to produce or sell rice, they are already indebted. Because before they harvest the rice or they harvest the crop, they need certain money to feed themselves. So once the time that the harvest season occurs, instead of eating them, they need to sell it in order to pay for their debts. So that is the sad reality, because there is a time frame wherein there is no harvest at all. So during those times, they need to ask money for someone else or to borrow money for someone else, and then they need to purchase food for themselves and other necessities. So that's the reason why instead of having their food, they need to sell it in order to pay back to those people where they borrow their money in order to provide other necessities for their day-to-day living. So that's the reason.
Is that clear enough?
Does it make sense to you? According to one of my professors in De La Salle, agriculture or farmers is one of the most promising profession. So why promising? Because he says that the farmers always say, I will promise I will pay you the money after we harvest. That's why it's called the most promising profession. Because they always promise that they are going to pay back after they harvest their crops. It's actually very sad.
I agree to that. That's actually kind of sad, but true, yeah.
Sad but true. That's the sad reality of farmers are facing. That's the sad reality. That's why agriculture is not that attractive to young people because of that. Because it's some kind of stressful and depressing in that case.
Okay. Thank you very much. By the way, I saw one more question from the Zoom. I think we can display just only one question, I think, because of the time constraint. Yeah, that one from the Faculty of Economics. Indonesia is a country with, allow me to read it for you. Indonesia is a country with abundant natural resources. However, it has not been able to utilize internal production, and imports of raw materials are still high. According to you, what is the government's strategy to maximize sustainable economic development and strengthening the economic development, basically? Because currently many individuals still rely on imports because of commissions and bonuses for some parties. Officials in the Indonesian government come from various political parties. Election of officials also uses money politics. So officials use their authority for personal gain. Good and correct government will achieve sustainable development goals. So I think this is from the Philippines experience.
Yes. We also experience the same thing wherein politics really play a major role in terms of economic growth, because there are actually ample amounts of supply of produce, but actually due to rampant corruption, most of the products that are being produced abroad are still being imported. So one of the things that we can look into is to provide policies regarding import of materials. If we have proper policies, actually I know you have policies on that, but if the problem is on the implementation aspect. If we will just be strict on the implementation of these policies, guidelines, laws, procedure, and everything, therefore it can be avoided. But the first thing that we have to do is, of course, to eradicate corruption. Corruption is the evil of all evils. Because if we will just follow the rules, the laws that we've created, that they actually themselves created, and they are the ones who are the lawbreakers, then there will be enough, you will be able to utilize your products well, or you could be able to utilize your resources well. And then what? Some of the produce will just be considered as surplus, and then it will go to waste after all the imported materials, which are very low in prices actually. That's the problem with the Philippines as well. We have rice products in the Philippines. We have imported products. And if you go to the market, the imported products are lesser in cost as compared to those who are locally produced. So of course, people, they want to save money. Instead of buying the locally grown produce, they tend to produce the cheaper one, which is basically from other countries. This is the difficult part of it, sad part of it. If we only eradicate, it boils down to politics and corruption, actually.
Yeah. And if we import it
I
from
don't know
other
if you
countries-
would agree, Mr. Political Science Major.
Of course. And of course, we talk about the import from other countries. Then
Yes.
that means it's not a clean energy. The emissions
Yeah,
for
they
importing.
emit the carbon footprint that they will be emitting from importing from one country area to another. That the carbon footprint is so huge. So that is actually not sustainable, and it's not good for the environment as well.
It in terms of implementation, I think that's a huge homework for every country in the
Every
world.
country. That's actually the challenge. We know we are capable of producing, but unfortunately, the support of the government is not that strong.
I thank you very much, Professor Firmini. I think we have come to the final part, the end of our session for today. And of course, we would like to thank you very, very much
It's
for
my
your
pleasure, sir.
insights.
It's my pleasure, of course. Thank you so much. Thank
Okay.
you. It's been a pleasure to be speaking with you this afternoon. Thank you.
All right. So I think that's it for this afternoon session. Again, thank you very much, Professor Fernie, for your insights, your presentations. And that's it for now. We will meet again for the next discussions. I think we will still have one. For now, I would like to end it with Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.